Hi, everybody. Um, we have I hope everyone is doing well before I get started and taking as much care as you possibly can under these circumstances, regardless of your thoughts. This is a question from Pat Donahue from New Jersey. And she says, when we are practicing being aware inside, when we are engaging with others, you said it's a bit like trying to be in two places at once. When we are in our own space and trying to quiet down the internal dialogue, how does it work when, say, we are working on a project or planning our day or prepping for teaching a class? How do we do that thinking active, act, I think she means actively, and be aware internally at the same time? Well, Pat, it's a conundrum, isn't it? If you've tried it, um, you're trying to do two things at the same time. So basically, you get confused and you start pointing in one direction versus another direction. And this is pretty legitimately normal for us. We're not used to paying attention to two things at the same time. We're more used to acting uh, in a reflex, regardless of how many things are happening around us. There could be three or four things happening around us. So we reflexively respond to those three or four things. When it comes to becoming conscious of doing so, it's a different story. So, just a couple of things that might be helpful. If you're sitting and watching TV, for example, pretty good movie, or not so good movie, depending on the circumstances. And it's a good time to say, okay, I can watch this TV, but at the same time, let me try and focus behind me. Or if you can't do that, let me start by focusing right at the center of my forehead or between my eyebrows, and then pushing out a little bit in front of my brow, about 6 to 8 inches or so, or right on the brow at first. You're just trying something different. At the same time, if the movie's half interesting, what you'll do is you'll automatically be watching the movie. So, in a kind of a way, you're doing two things at the same time. What you're looking for is to construct a slow constructed awareness. It means you're allowing yourself to have space in your awareness for noticing more than one thing. You can do it unconsciously, but you can't do it very well consciously. So if two people are talking, for example, and you're trying to listen to both of them at the same time, you fill in the blanks with your own version of what would be there. It's the same thing when you get frustrated about trying something different. You fill in the blanks with kind of a frustration that usually relates to this is difficult, this is not very good, I'm not doing it perfectly well, all that particular kind of chatter. It's not a thing that you're supposed to be perfect at. It's a thing to practice. And our judgmental relationship with ourselves often will interject how well we're doing at something. In fact, that interjection is really an interference with practicing. This is not uncommon. I think everyone does this with new things. I watched a person walk into a batter's cage one time, and the ball was coming at a certain speed. It wasn't very fast, but they had never tried to hit a ball. Uh, they never played any kind of a game that had that, and they were missing the ball. And so after about 4 or 5 times, they said this: I can't do this. I'm not very good at it. Therefore, why should I bother? That's legitimate thinking in our often in the way that we do things that we're not, let's say, from our point of view, we're not capable of doing, but we're not practicing. We're engaging so that we can judge what we're doing. In the practicing, that's where the learning starts to come into play, and the understanding ultimately of what that does for us comes into play as well. Doing things rather slowly and tentatively at first is very helpful. When I started learning how to do this way back in my timeline, I began by trying to figure out why I should be doing that, and nothing came to mind, to be honest, except that internally that seemed to be the thing to do. So when I was listening to music, or when I was engaging with a television set, or when I was practicing, this is terrible, but when I was talking to somebody else and they were talking, you remind yourself that I'm more of an introvert, then they were speaking and I began to learn how to be aware, let's say, around me, in the back, in the front, to the sides, to the brow, to the top of the head. I'm practicing all of this stuff. And then I realized when they were speaking to me, I was actually attempting the best I could to listen at the same time that I was doing this. Now, that's doing two things at the same time. It took a little bit of practice for sure. And then I wasn't quite sure why this was necessary. And I began to realize that after I'd been practicing this for a bit, that when I walked into a room and there was a person in the room, I began to realize that I could perceive where that personality was getting the juice or the energy to express itself. It might have been fed from the solar plexus, the root and gonad center, to some degree. But then I began to realize there's more levels in these systems, and they feed the upper systems. That took a little while because I was focused, like everybody else. I was thinking, well, because I had listened to somebody talk about these chakra things, and the lower ones were bad and the upper ones were good. And then I began to realize this was nonsense, not real at all. All of the whole of the system is one system, and it has many levels. So I began to realize that if I was trying to quiet down inside and just be aware around my body, I would notice, first of all, if I was in a room by myself, I would notice what centers were on in me and how I must be using these centers to engage as a personality with others, whether it be internal personality or external personality. Both are real. A reaction inside, a smile, whatever, depending on the set of circumstances and based on my upbringing, remember, as yours, Pat, or would be based on yours, or any others who are listening would be based on theirs. and what they make sense of to comfort themselves in how their images are supported by your beliefs and the need you have to maintain those images for a purpose related to being comfortable within yourself. It doesn't take very long when you're thinking about these things to realize that 8 billion people are doing exactly the same thing. But they're not paying attention to the system, the deeper system, the soul system or higher state system, whatever you want to call it, that tree of life formula, Sephiroth, chakras, whatever. These are little valves that move energy through for the purpose of helping you to look within, look without, practice being aware of it while you're learning that you're using it for the purpose of doing you. Nothing negative there at all. And you will notice sometimes, as I've heard many people say, oh, their brow is open, they're superior to other people in a particular way. Everybody's brow is open because you have thoughts. But not everyone is aware of the fact that that brow is open and where it's open and why it's open. And can it express itself beyond this natural comfort zone of our species in relationship to what you do as an individual in the species? Like we're sitting, you and I, let's say we're talking to Pat now, and we're sitting and we're chatting and having a cup of tea of some kind. And 3 or 4 people are around in the room and they're buzzing around, and somebody walks in the door and they are linked to a level of perception which is beyond the natural norm in our world. There is a natural norm in our world, and it is acting as if. And therefore you construct a system, literally a system, within the imagination. It doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's good. It just is a system which is similar to our personalities. And in that system, you anticipate what the other person is about, and that shows up in a sensing mechanism, and you can speak about that in the terms that relate to your belief. It doesn't mean it's always true. It just means it's an anticipated kind of a semi-guess about the other person. Now, that guess has an awful lot to do with how you were brought up. If you were brought up to be judgmental, you'll be judgmental about that person. If you're brought up to see that person from a different angle, you'll see that person from a different angle. If you're brought up to self-protect, you'll be self-protecting. This is normal in the world of listening and engaging with others in relationship to how they function with you in that moment. You have no idea that you're affecting them. You have no idea that they're affecting you. You have 2 systems there, and you're nervous about this. These 2 systems, and therefore you can, if you're uncomfortable, it's them that's causing it. It may be true, but it may not be true at all. It may be how you engage with the world and protect yourself, and your warning signals are up, and you're feeling uncomfortable. This is natural in our world. Learning how to be aware of a deeper level takes you into a different place. Takes you into a place where you're not judging quite as much. You're learning that the lower systems are always there. And I know there are many belief systems that say that's not true. But if you have an experience that's different than a belief system, go with your experience. You will begin to notice that all of those three lower centers are like a platform that come up and help those upper centers to come on. Without them, they would not come on. In other words, you would not be alive here. This is very interesting because as those upper centers come on, I know I've said this before, your awareness increases around others. But first level of increase is you are perceiving their personality, and then you're using your own personality to assess that, which is imperfect. If you have an imperfect assessor, you will assess others imperfectly. Since none of us are perfect, pretty well, we don't get things perfectly. But you can think you're doing this perfectly. The trick in this is, if you are doing this, you'll notice your root center on more, your gonad center on more, your solar plexus on more, even your heart center on more in a very particular area. And you can train yourself, you training you being helpful to you, to slow that down and say, whoa, just a minute. I don't know everything about this. Maybe there's more information that I can learn about. So you begin like a child again to start learning again about something that you knew wasn't real before. And now it becomes more real and you're going slowly. The biggest fear in all of this, and with these exercises, Pat, is you get to the point where you start to think you know it all. And this is normal for us in our world. Take a look at the news. Take a look at somebody who lives around the corner. Take a look at this. Take a look at that. We all have kind of, we slip into these modes. No offense to anybody out there who's listening. And these modes are valid and right. And then we try to find people to agree with us, and or we try to reassure people that that would be okay. Yeah, in everything. So this person in this batting cage hits the ball once, just once, out of about 10 times. But it happened to be about the second last or last time. And she got really excited. And now she's afraid that the next 10 times she won't hit again. She tries it about 4 or 5 times and she hits it twice. She knows that she can learn and she can get better. It's the same with us when we're practicing things of these nature that are really out of our category. And we don't want them to be added to our purview, our list of things that we can do, because I will tell you something. It will be different than many others. Not better, not more able, not more this, more that. It'll be different than many others. Then you have to learn that it's okay if you're different. And it's okay if you're just a learner. Most people have a very difficult time with this one. I've been doing this stuff for well over 40 years. I consider myself a continual learner. I hope I never lose that way of thinking, because that means I'm open to the next step that may be there for me. I hope anyone listening can begin to feel the same way and not get too puffed up about learning how to do something, or too frustrated with not getting perfect results right away, because that isn't the way things are. It's the way we want to believe that it must be. And that really puts ourselves down. There's no putting down in this. It's just about learning and continuing and not allowing yourself to rein yourself in because it's difficult. And it isn't easy. Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. Anybody, I've met so many people who tell me that they're able to do all kinds of things. And I say, oh, that's great. But it means nothing to me. But it means everything to them. When they are really able, it will mean everything to them. And they will not tell anybody. Because there is a difference. And the difference is not in the expression. The difference is in the awareness internally. And it is not easy to be uncomfortable inside as you're learning. Because in our world, learning means you reach a goal and now you've made it. You've made it. You are like this and that, and you're fantastic. You're fantastic to begin with. Learning means continual. The goal is the learning. In the old traditions, they always said the goal is the path. Be on it. Never mind about how you're relating to others and all the rest of this stuff and so versus so and all this sort of stuff. That means you just stepped off the bus. You're in a bus stop. You'll be there for a little while, but you'll get back on the bus every now and then. And it'll be fine. It's what we do in our world. It's not a negative thing. It's what we do. It's how we live it. And if we didn't live it that way, we would be classifying ourselves as very vulnerable all the time and always lesser. And it just isn't true. But beliefs are beliefs. I'm not sure if I answered everything there, Pat, because here we are. You and I are in this room. I know I realized that I left that and I went to another thing. Here you and I are in the room, and we're perceiving others. We're perceiving that the root centers, gonad centers, and solar plexus are on to some degree, but only to some degree. If they were on to an ultimate degree, all the other centers would be stimulated to a very high level. And the high level ones would be stimulating the lower ones. And there would be a kind of linking there between the matter planes and the other dimensions of an engagement with those things that we cannot perceive yet. Learning is not a negative thing. It's exceedingly positive. I'm going to check and see if I left anything out. Yes. I said, oh yeah, if you don't mind me reading a little bit of this, and I may not agree with it. Keep it simple. Start slow. Prepare. In other words, try to be aware in front of the chest. Try to be aware behind the back. Even a little bit. Slow. Start slow. Fail a million times, but start again. Be aware a little bit out there, a little bit behind. 3 or 4 inches, enough. Start. Slowly draw your attention up to the top of your head, and then bring your attention down to about, I'd say roughly about here, if you can see that, right about there. Or if that's uncomfortable, between your eyebrows or between your eyes. And if you don't like that, here. It's not a matter of you thinking your version is right or not. It's a matter of doing it. We get deterred by a detail that makes the individual more satisfied with themselves because we're vulnerable, not because we're bad, it's because we're vulnerable. And it's the nature of this humanity that we are a part of. So, and off the top of your head, prepare and try to be aware behind you. So, if we're sitting and watching TV, Pat, then it's easier to be aware out here and behind you, maybe above the head, in front of your brow. And then we're watching TV. We don't have to have our attention glued tight, soften it down. You know you did that. You know you did it. Watch TV. It'll slip from you. You'll notice you're watching the program better, or you're cooking, or you're thinking about doing something. Then do the thing you're thinking of. And every now and then, just stop for a second, be aware there, go back to what you're doing. You're trying to melt or blend two levels of awareness together. Perfection is not the goal. Doing is the goal. Just doing it. That's all. That's all. Nothing else. Nothing else. It's okay. Success is doing it once. Continuation, continue. That's it. Just keep doing it. It increases your awareness off the system that you've already constructed, because you are constructed to only see that which everyone else is noticing. Look at it in a belief. If you read material, you will read that material and you will start believing that. And because that belief is there, you'll be constructing a form that relates directly to the need to see what's in the belief, or in what you've read, or in what somebody told you, or whatever. What you're trying to do is engage and be aware, and then just practice being aware a little bit at a time. Don't get into a competition with anybody about what they see versus what you see. Not helpful, because there are different engagements, as I said before, with belief. Not helpful at all. Different judgments or assessments about what one would believe. Don't go there. When something occurs, it'll be so different that it will shock you a little bit. Let it shock you a little bit. Let it soften down, and just proceed more, little at a time. Slowly, a deeper perception or understanding will get stronger, not to make you important, to help you to be aware. Remember, all awareness starts with the coarser levels. All awareness starts with the coarser levels. Unfortunately, assessment is maintained in relationship to the coarser levels, but it can slowly move to be slightly different than what you start out with. And that is progression. That is process. And then get to the point ultimately where you see so many different ways of engaging with life, and understand each and every one of those ways of engaging with life are coming at life from a different angle, a different perspective, a different belief about what is valid and what's not valid. And all of those methods are not perfect. They're just ways of seeing things. Later, you begin to cultivate something a little broader, where you understand it's a more compassionate way of looking at these things, and understanding that there are dilemmas in many ways of looking at things. But it doesn't stop people from doing that. And it will continue to be that way because we are not interested in being helped to see differently. We're interested in maintaining first cause, how we already believe things are. That's the first cause. Try it out with yourself. Don't tell anybody about it. Just when people are talking, see what you really think, and you'll have a belief related to you. They will have a belief related to them. If it doesn't hurt anybody, fortunately, sometimes it does, but then we just continue and we grow through those understandings and hopefully broaden them out to some degree. We all have difficulty doing that. That sounds like a generalization. Very, very individual, generalized. Every individual in 8 billion people, generalized. We do similar things, whether you believe it or not, doesn't make any difference. We link together. We broaden out in the unconscious. You have a reaction, someone else has a similar reaction to your reaction. And you both are reacting to each other. And you're playing out the reaction. You don't interfere with that because you're used to doing it reflexively. And that's a part of the system that you believe is very valuable. This is what we do. You're trying to be aware of the system and watch that, watching it in yourself, and then you can interact with it. And not necessarily only go with your belief or with someone else's either. But you begin to learn internally that there's nothing wrong with allowing yourself to understand another's way of doing things, but it doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. You will be involved with those consequences, of course, that might touch you based on that. But you will see it better. And this is a practice that helps you to see inside better, and the inside, the soul structure or the inner structure that gives life to a person's view. You'll see that better and understand that that's where they are and that's where you are. Not this versus that. That's where you are and that's where they are. And they will shift that with their emotion. They will shift that with their thinking because it's all tied together, and with their actions. It's not very comfortable to see things differently, but it is really valuable. Personally. Okay, I did mention in front of the chest, behind and above the head. Oh yeah, try and hold down the complication of devaluation, or you're doing it better than somebody else. It complicates the relationship you have with your own growing. Soften it down the best you can and just keep doing it. Just keep growing. If you're planning, for example, something, do the planning and then stretch the planning intensity. You're still doing the planning. Stretch it to allow you to be aware slightly around you if you can, or slightly in your forehead, or slightly in your chest. You're observing, you're looking. Go looking. And then if you get confused, stop the planning. Take a couple of good strong breaths, relax a bit, go back to planning. Sometimes planning has to be done. Sometimes your work has to be done. You don't have to do this to the point where you can't do your work. You're doing this to the point where you can begin to be aware slowly, more times than you could before of the energy where it might be. So you're just remembering to attempt to continue to do it. And this idea of remembering does not include stressing out. If you find yourself stressing out with this, take a breath, back away. If you stress out with your planning, you'll do the same thing. Relax. Go have a cup of tea or go look in the backyard or walk around and be okay and go back to your planning. Same thing, you do the same thing with the exercise. If you stress out and hold it that way, it's not going to be helpful to you. And you're not going to let it be helpful to you. Okay, I that's the best I can do right now with that, Pat, I think. I wish you well with it. I have another question from Marie-Josée Perrier in Ottawa. How can a piece of the future fit in the now? I tease Marie. She gives me some abstract questions sometimes. If the elements of that future are very different than the culture of now, I think she's talking about the idea of getting to the point where you can slow down your relationship with the images that you've constructed for you, and that's how you see yourself. And you protect those images, and you don't want any other images to interfere with them. And that's the now she's talking about. Then, in those particular moments, it's natural for all of us to take a little break from ourselves. Our problem is that we don't see that because our perception level is not strongly focused on watching ourselves too much. It's more focused on watching others because that's the training that we've been a part of. That's not a negative thing, that's just training. And so what we're trying to do is from time to time, take a look at watching how you function and don't freak out about it and don't put too much stress on it. Just practice saying, okay, what am I doing? Oh, why did I do that? Oh, okay. I did that. Well, it seemed natural and it seems to be, and then you might have a whole bunch of reasons for it, which would be partly protection and partly because you're really interested in looking. So what else did she say? If the elements of that future are very different than the culture of now. And what she means is if a person is growing internally to a point where they can be observant but softer inside while they are, and not need to grab onto a reflex to assess a situation in a current moment, because that's what you're doing in that moment most of the time. No offense to anybody. Then energy from a different level can operate through some of the chakras that are slowly opening because your focus is slightly off the training that you believe you have to protect. And you're quieter, more quiet, a little bit more silent in relationship to the need to evaluate and protect and make value you, because if you don't value you, then you devalue you, and that's not helpful. So, but we don't know that. We learn about that. We say, oh, there is a place that I can go to where I can not put myself down or up. I can just say, maybe energy coming in through some of those chakras that are quieter in me can be helpful to another. That's a kind of a beginning aspect of that. And what I said was that this engagement with the present or the now, which is really basically webbed with the past always, until you start shifting a little bit, then new ways of seeing things are linking, webbing with the past as well. This is always happening. Your plans curve around to fit into how you have developed in the past. That's basically what I was talking about. The present is only a second. If you are talking about inner development, the past and present are energy forms with each person's life fitting into the species and how it is and has been functioning. So what I'm saying there is that all form is energy. There is nothing that is not energy. I'm sitting in a chair. It's energy. I that's sitting in a chair is energy. It's an energy form that is able to communicate with me, with you, with others the best it can. The chair is a chair thing. It helps me to be comfortable. It's a tool. And that's what its value is. But it's still energy. The whiteboard behind me is energy. Any images, you are energy. What you do is you tighten and loosen an expression through the mouth to another that has words in it that we have learned to understand have certain meanings. There are many meanings to many words that we do not really use anymore. But those meanings are only a couple hundred years old. And we still don't use them now. We use other meanings for a particular word. It's kind of interesting. It's complicated. And many languages at the same time. All energy, symbols used to express and engage with from one form to another. And those tones we have in our emotional, mental disposition is just movement of energy, like playing a piano. Oh, that's supposed to mean thunder. Oh, okay. Oh, that's supposed to mean relaxing, enjoy, or happy, or having a great time. All energy related to and equipped by a reflexive engager related to the brain and its lines of force that operate from it. Oh yeah, it's hidden in a physical energetic form on these levels, but it's running through our arms, legs, our body, right up to the brain, in, out, in, out. And the system is operated by this ebb and flow of energy relative to how you think, how you react, how you engage in the past, in the present. And that habitually becomes something that is naturally going to be a tendency of the future. Unless this form that we have constructs a way of interfering with that reflex because it had another way of looking at something that it saw in the past as protective. You need to protect that, keep it going. And then 1 second, you do something slightly different. It affects how you were in the past. But I think Marie is also talking about energy transmission operating through an individual from another dimension, because the individual is silencing, quietening down this dimension or material plane, enough so that they can allow themselves to perceive a flow of force operating through into this dimension from a slightly different area of, one could say, space, time, one could say, or just a different place, one could say, that is always with us. We are engaged as an individual with centers that are open in a certain kind of a way that relates directly to how we are, how we appear to be, and are reflexively internally, and what we can handle broader than that, and soften down the reactions of how we function in the past, in today, in the instant of today. Everything is learning in this. I know I've said that before. Things that we try to understand, and we're very seriously attempting to understand right in this second. 10 minutes or an hour from now, when we're talking to somebody else, we use the methods of before and now, because now is part of before. We haven't got the ability to make a space yet where we can move into that space, hypothetically, move into that space, and not necessarily express ourselves exactly the way we did before, because before makes us feel comfortable. I don't care what it looks like. It still makes us feel comfortable, even if we're vulnerable, even if we are not comfortable, as a definition pluralized all over the world. Discomfort is not comfortable. That doesn't mean anything. If you're used to being uncomfortable, you will call that more comfortable, and you will protect that discomfort. But as any change occurs, it makes a different web. It links, and adaptation occurs in all of us, relatively speaking. And it gives us perhaps a second or two to consider something slightly broader than before. So the future is touching us. And we should be grateful for that, because if we understand correctly, what we have done in the past is automatically pushed into the future, because it has been working for us, we think, as we have been before. So, Ron, what do you think? Who's going to be interested in being something other than what we've already been? And why should we bother? And what she's saying here is that question comes up. So in that question lies an interesting response. If you are energy, truly, do you understand that others affect you without your knowledge? Do you understand this? Because they are energy too. Think about that for a second. you act out in ways that relate to someone else's frustration, anger, happiness, joy, judgment. And they would rather have you act in the way they want you to act. They would rather that be because it supports the way they believe the world should be. That makes them feel valued. To make you feel valued, allow yourself to understand that you're easily manipulated. One could say in a not so good way or in a good way. That's why beginning to understand differently than you do already is supportive of you. And being okay with not getting things perfectly is a resounding of a great resounding value. Understanding that, because our support systems, culturally, nationally, scholastically, do not do that for you. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm just saying they don't do that. Because someone who gets an 83 is better than someone who gets an 82. It's a sheer nonsense. But you depend on that because you've been trained to depend on this. And it's a kind of a need, all of us have it, to be valued. And this is within the species. External, but still in the species, there's nation against nation, east against west, this versus that, all kinds of things that occur. And putting down others has been a reflex of the whole of the species. And that puts down the species. What do I mean by that? Energetically, we are linked to a reflex reaction that validates us and devalues something that might be helpful to us simply because it changes us. And this is very difficult for us to even understand or allow ourselves to be okay. So when you're dealing with learning, go slow. Be respectful of you, how you are, but don't necessarily agree with you. And don't necessarily tell anybody else about it. That's cultivating a space inside of you so that you can allow yourself the willingness and the ability to reconsider not only what you believe is true, but what you believe is not true. It's not two ends. Truth isn't over here versus over there. There's a whole line of reference points all the way along them. This big curve. And we do not know everything. As a species, we do not. But we have legitimately constructed ideas, rules, like in mathematics, for example, or physics. This rule seems to work. Not always, under different circumstances, it might work slightly different, but nonetheless. And if anyone's interested in quantum theories, and then you're into an understanding people who are legitimately materially based trying to understand something is non-substantial, except that it is. Be okay with yourselves, but continue to grow. We are linked directly to definitions of needing to know this versus that. And so you'll always be second guessing yourself about, if 10 billion people believe this way, it must be true. We don't have 10 billion people, so it's only 8 billion. But it's not necessarily true. Not the 8 billion. I wish you well. Learning and growing is a wonderful thing. Frustration is a normal thing. Questions are demanding, but valuable. And I wish you all well with your questions, as I do with my own. Take care. And now we're going to meditate. We'll probably go between 50 minutes and an hour, something in that general direction. Enjoy yourself. And now we'll just do the balancing and grounding. And thanks, everybody. And we'll talk to you later. Bye for now.